Welcome to Real Estate Talk, part of the Realty Media Group. We also produce The Property Show, Real Estate Uncut and CoreLogic's auction updates. All available for catch-up anytime at realty.com.au. Before we get underway, thanks to BMT Tax Depreciation, Printforce and Propertyology for their support. Hello, we are far enough into COVID now to be understanding the impact that it's having not only on buyers and sellers, but also agents, buyers agents, sellers agents, anyone involved in property. I guess there are so many people in different areas who are being impacted, but let's really have a look at this. Miriam Sandkuhler will be joining me to talk about this. Miriam is the CEO and property advocate for Property Mavens. She's also a best-selling author, has written a number of books, and is in fact she's one of the top authors on Kindle for when it comes to property books, and she knows a lot about the industry. Miriam, always great talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me on today, Kevin.
Yeah, property advocacy really means that you deal with both buyers and sellers. You're not just a buyer's agent, or I say just, you're not a buyer's agent and also just a selling agent. You work on both parts. So I guess you get a really good feel for buyers and sellers. Let's have a look at the different categories, Miriam. What do you think are the likely consequences of what we're going through now? Let's firstly deal with buyers.
Sure. Well, look, let me just say that definitely buyers and sellers have been caught in the crossfire of this lockdown and this extended lockdown. Basically, their rights to buy or sell property has actually been taken away from them. And unfortunately, currently the Victorian government in the media is referencing not wanting to, have public auctions with people standing around on the streets. But they're seemingly forgetting about the fact that we had very successfully implemented precautionary measures in stage 3 lockdown, which is all that we as an industry is asking to go back to. Certainly if we start talking about buyers, there are buyers in the market who have sold property. Due to the current low stock levels or the wisdom of not buying property sight unseen, they're having challenges in terms of determining where their next steps are. Even, the capacity to rent a property is actually quite challenging at the moment. So they could be coming into a situation where they've bought, but they may not be able to settle if they relied upon selling a property to do so. And if they have bought, buying without a physical or building and pest inspection at the moment is highly, highly risky. So that's currently the predicament that people are finding themselves in. And also there are some buyers who qualify for the federal government first home buyer deposit scheme. Now they have a very limited window of 3 months in terms of being eligible for that scheme. And a lot of buyers now will find that 3-month eligibility has just disappeared during this lockdown.
Yeah, I saw some figures recently about the number of first home buyers who've entered the market. I think, we haven't seen levels like this for quite a long time. So there has been a rush to market, which has put a lot of pressure on prices as well, because stock levels are very low, Miriam.
That's correct. Stock levels are low and there is pent-up demand in the marketplace. Certainly, I do anticipate that when the market reopens, there will be a bit of a rush into the market, and how that's going to roll out in weeks to come is yet to be seen. Chances are, if we only have a very short 6-week selling season, there'll be a lot of property come onto the market in a very short period of time, and it's highly likely that agents will be doing 7 to 10-day auction campaigns, or there'll be a lot more off-market, pre-market and private sales.
Yeah, I know. Let's deal with agencies and agents now for a moment. Selling agents, I'll refer to here. In my conversations with a number of them, there's two different levels. Some of them are doing extremely well, and others are really starving because they've got very fixed overheads like rent and wages and so on, and they're just simply not able. They might not have a rent roll to support their business. So there seems to be 2 levels of agencies, and I'm just wondering what's going to happen a little further down the track when a lot of the support from government wanes or even stops, Miriam.
That's right. Yeah, so we do have selling agents who are struggling with fixed overheads, and they may be revisiting the cost of labour and pondering retrenchment. Some of them can still list and sell properties technically, but there may be vendors who are hesitant to sell even off market until things become a bit more stable. And look, some of the properties that are currently for sale may not sell due to the fact that buyers are generally unwilling to buy property merely with a, based on the whole concept of looking at a video and photos. And of course, there's high risk doing that, and also the inability to get a building and pest inspected through. So there are absolutely agencies that are going to struggle on the selling side. On the buying side, we tend to have lower overheads. So there may be a need to cut down staff hours, but probably less of a likelihood of retrenching staff.
I want to talk about solutions in a moment, and that sort of leads me into the next part of this, because I want to conclude with, what are the solutions, or what's the way forward. But I hear what you say about buying sight unseen. I'm getting reports from agents all around Australia who are saying they're quite staggered by the number of people now who are prepared to buy sight unseen, who are prepared to have virtual inspections. I know you're very cautious about that.
Yeah, look, I think that's probably the biggest gamble anyone can take in their life. I mean, if they're willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars on a property based on a selling agent's video and photos that are designed to show the best of the property and not the worst of the property, then that will be equally as big a gamble as taking that money and going to a local casino and putting it all on the table. Because the reality is, when you don't physically inspect a property, you have no awareness of the spatial elements of the property. You've not got no awareness around the room size, the ceiling height, the aspect. You don't know if there are neighbours overlooking. You don't know if there's light blocking you out. You don't truly know every part of that property from every angle. And I find it gobsmacking that people are prepared to do that. And I think they're getting caught up in the fear of missing out. I think they're possibly being manipulated by selling agents who are saying that, if you don't buy this property now, you're going to miss out because we've got other offers. And that's a typical tactic that agents use sometimes, honestly, and sometimes maybe not. But I think if people are buying property sight unseen, then they need to insert a clause drafted by their solicitor that gives them the right of refusal to purchase based on the opportunity to inspect the property before settlement as some sort of precaution.
I would imagine there wouldn't be too many sellers who would want to go along with that, because that's almost like putting the property on hold in the never, given that they may not be able to have any inspections for months ahead. Of course, we need also to realise, Miriam, don't we, that not every state in Australia is as bad off as it is in Victoria. In Queensland, there are still inspections, there are still auctions happening.
Absolutely. Well, certainly there's data that's come out from other states that shows when the lockdown comes to an end, near normal conditions are returning. Definitely, while Victoria's in darkness now, focus on the fact that the sun will shine again, and particularly early 2021, once this lockdown ideally comes to an end. And we certainly know that in WA, the data has come out where home loan approvals are only 10% below the same time last year, which under normal circumstances isn't great. But in the current year that we're in, that's not terrible. And if WA is something to go by, we know there's pent-up demand. We know there's potential for short, sharp price increases as soon as the market opens again, because there are people pre-approved. And there'll be people wanting to take advantage of that as well. So now would be the time to talk to an advisor to get that guidance around opportunities that may come up leading into Christmas and certainly post-Christmas.
Let's talk about the industry before we move to some of the logical solutions. What do you see in terms of impact on stock right now?
Yeah, look, there are definitely vendors who are holding off, waiting to see what's going to happen, because they don't want to find themselves in a position where they sell, but then they can't buy themselves. And that's currently the predicament a lot of vendors have found themselves in. They've sold, they're going to have to settle, that they may not have anywhere to move into that they've bought as a result. I definitely anticipate leading into Christmas that those timeframes to sell property, as we discussed, will be very short. I know there are certainly selling agents who've got multiple listings and they're desperate to get photographers through so they can actually start putting those properties to market. So there is the potential for more stock to come into the market. We just need the government to allow us to at least go back to stage 3 to get the ball rolling again and let people get on with their lives.
Let's deal with Victoria for a moment. Specifically, there's been a lot of calls from industry bodies, REBA being the most recent one, calling on the state premier there to allow auctions and open homes to at least try and free the market up a little bit. I think there were even some calls to announced that real estate should be an essential service. What's your standpoint on that?
Look, I absolutely agree. I mean, we're talking about security, providing a roof over someone's head is an essential part of life. We have already shown by an exemplary level of managing the process during stage 3 with online auctions and one-on-one inspections. We're certainly recommending that or suggesting that we want to go back to stage 3 with really good record keeping of every person who's inspecting, full disclosure of personal details for contact tracing. Everyone's wearing PPE, everyone's got a particular time that they've got allocated, and just having the agent available with one person inspecting to buy. We've already managed that successfully, and there's no reason why technically we can't go back. And it is incongruous to have people lining up at a cafe to buy coffee, or multiple people not managing social distancing, yet we can't very carefully manage this and allow the government to, or rather allow buyers and sellers to continue to move forward with their lives.
Okay, let's close this conversation out with some of the solutions. What do you see going forward, Miriam?
Yeah, well, definitely at a minimum, for the government to provide exemptions for those vendors who have sold but need to buy or relocate to ensure they're not going to be homeless. For buyers who are in financial distress, where they bought but planned to sell and now they can't, they're finding that they're going to default on a contract and potentially lose their deposit, or they're going to have to find other arrangements. So if the government will allow some sort of exemption for them to be able to do what they need to do to not end up in worse financial distress than they're currently in. Certainly the first home buyers save a deposit scheme, if the government can extend that by a minimum of 3 months to those people that have qualified, because anyone who's had any kind of pre-approval during this period or approval for that first home buyer deposit scheme will find it's evaporated quite quickly. And of course, to allow the industry to go back to stage 3, to allow one-on-one appointments, to go back to the online auctions, which were working quite well, and to allow the industry to keep going and give people their rights back to buy and sell real estate.
Thanks, Miriam. Always great talking to you. Miriam Sandkuhler, of course, is the CEO and a property advocate from Property Mavens, and all of the details, of course, on Miriam's website. Stay with us. Miriam's going to stay with us as well. And after the break, I'll be talking about a few more of the impacts. We'll have a look at what's happening with the banks and with lending in particular. That in just a moment.
Successful property investors know the value of leverage, but as many as 80% are willing to leave sometimes thousands of dollars of unclaimed benefits on the table every year by overlooking depreciation. Depreciation is the wear and tear of a building and its plant and equipment. The ATO allows the owners of any income-producing property to claim depreciation as a deduction, meaning you will pay less tax. BMT's fee is 100% tax deductible. Call BMT Tax Depreciation on 1300 728 726 now for a free assessment of your likely deductions. That's 1300 728 726, or use the link at Real Estate Talk.
Welcome back, and staying with me to talk about more of the impact as a flow on from what's happening with COVID around the country. We're going to have a look at banks and financing in this portion of the interview with Miriam Sandkuhler, who is CEO and property advocate from Property Mavens. Miriam, thanks for staying with us. Let's talk about the banks. What are you noticing their attitude to all this? What's happening?
Look, we certainly know of vendors who are a bit distressed because they're wanting to sell properties. Their financial circumstances are maybe such that they've lost their job. They may have an investment property that they can't lease and they're wanting to take it to the market. There are some banks who are serving clients notice to reinstate full repayments, and they might be taking principal and interest out of hibernation, and this is causing distress to some investors who need to sell. But conversely, there are also banks who aren't pushing, transitioning people from interest only into principal and interest because they don't want to run on the banks as well. So there's a bit of a balance and a fine line going on, and it does depend on people's individual circumstances. This is a really tricky situation, which what now appears to be what will be a very short spring selling season of 6 weeks. And quite frankly, solicitors, banks and lenders are going to have to be willing to work through the Christmas period of summer to help work with buyers and sellers, given this delay to the spring selling season.
Yes, because the market does generally turn off, doesn't it? Around about mid-December as we sort of run towards Christmas. And in a lot of cases, auctions even come off the agenda until very late in January or early in February. it's likely to be a totally different landscape 2020 through into 2021, Miriam.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly, as I said, there'll be a lot of stock coming to the market in a very short period of time with very, very short auction campaigns. So buyers are going to be really busy scrambling, deciding, what's appropriate for them and what they want to bid and buy for. And certainly in January, I don't think any real estate agent's going to be having a holiday, given we've all had, the lockdown to date. And I anticipate that certainly January into February, the market will start to recover. Again, as I said before, the sun will shine again, and there'll be people who are ready to go in a position where they can buy leading into Christmas and they can buy into January and February. And those people that are holding back and they don't want their pre-approval periods to lapse, they're going to wait until things open up again. Well, then there'll be a second wave of them coming through afterwards. So, as WA has shown and other states have shown, when the gates open again, there is the opportunity for recovery to go back almost back to normal. We just need that to happen as soon as possible.
There's another aspect to this too, and that is rentals. In fact, I read an article just recently just highlighting the fact that Sydney, one of the most expensive markets in Australia, there are still areas pockets where you can buy a property and it's positively geared from day one. Makes me wonder about the amount of pressure on tenants with increasing rent payments, Miriam.
Well, I guess it's subject to, what the property's been purchased for and what the yield is. I mean, certainly in, Victoria right now, you're probably looking at a rental yield of 2.5%, 3% buying in a metro area if you're buying into the market currently, whereas regional areas are delivering, large regional centres are delivering a 4 to 6% yield. I mean, obviously everyone's circumstances are different. The capacity for a tenant to meet their rental obligations is largely linked to obviously their occupation and the industry that they work in. There's obviously an increase in younger people who are out of job because they may be working in areas like hospitality or industries that have now been shut down and had major consequences happen to those industries that may not recover. And a lot of them might be moving back home. So if you're a landlord, depending on what you bought, where you bought, and the level of oversupply or undersupply of that stock will largely determine the predicament you're going to find yourself in.
So what would be, what are you hearing from rental managers, people with, big rent rolls? How are they coping with this?
Look, they're really struggling. They're under enormous amounts of pressure. They're dealing with people's trauma and tragedy every day. So they're dealing with people in genuine distress, and they're also dealing with people who are trying it on and that, who aren't in genuine distress and they don't want to prove they're in financial distress, but they want a rent reduction for the sake of it. And then you've got people who just flatly taking advantage of the opportunity and refusing to pay rent regardless of circumstance. So honestly, they are really the heroes of the industry at the moment. Quite frankly, I've suggested to some estate agencies where they bring in a counsellor to help the staff, download at the end of the day or just share how they're feeling and how they're coping, because they are at the forefront of trauma, and not just with tenants, but with landlords as well. I mean, the state government's largely ignoring the plight of landlords. They've pretty well made the tenants the victims and the landlords are the ones that are the perpetrators, and that's just simply not true. There are plenty of investors, hardworking mums and dads who bought an investment property. It's their only opportunity to create financial wealth. They've found themselves out of work, and then next minute their tenant's not paying, and they're in financial straits themselves. Yet the moratorium on evictions and rental increases, the government's seeking to extend to the detriment of, landlords equally. So it's a really unfair situation at the moment. But property managers are doing an exceptional job. And, I think everyone who's got a property manager at the moment looking out for their interests should be really grateful. And if you don't have a property manager, you're probably going to be in a lot of strife.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we've got to also remember that mortgage, money is as cheap as it's ever been for quite a long time. It could be tempting for a number of people to maybe even overcommit in some senses, because the banks are really quite aggressively looking for business as well, Miriam.
Yeah, but you have to have a look at what happened with the Royal Banking Commission. No one's in a position to overcommit anymore. I mean, the banks will absolutely make sure that your serviceability will be able to carry you through even when interest rates increase again. I'm refinancing at the moment. The amount of information that the bank wants is phenomenal, particularly if you're a business owner. You know, they want BAS statements. They want to know if your business has been affected by COVID. I mean, they are basically drilling you inside and out, wanting to know about everything. So I really doubt that people are going to be in a position to overcommit. They're going to be given a budget or a capacity to buy, and they're just going to have to stick within that and then manage it.
What about delay times on finance approvals? You know, hearing word around Australia that it's anywhere from 21 to 30 days now just to get an approval.
Look, again, depending on your situation, whether you're a straight PAYG employee or if you're running your own business, there's an enormous amount of refinances going through the system at the moment. So that's putting a lot of pressure on it because people who have been on higher interest rates want to take advantage of the lower ones. I'm speaking to many mortgage brokers who, you know, in some instances, depending on the lender, they're able to get approval through in 48 hours. And then some are blowing out to 60 days, particularly with some of the top 4 banks. So it comes down to really working with a very good broker. If you're chasing a particular interest rate and that means the lender on that interest rate is going to take 60 days to get approval, well, then you run the risk of maybe prices escalating in that time. If you go with a lender who's, you know, able to turn around approval quite quickly, but you may pay 0.15% basis interest rate higher, well, then you might decide to get that for the sake of getting into the market. So now's really the time to be working very carefully with a broker, understand what your options are, understand the implications of getting your approval sooner rather than later, and then deciding how to proceed from there.
Miriam, just to round this chat out, and thank you so much for your time. Not very often we do a double bunger interview in the show, but it's been great to have you in. Your top 3 suggestions or pieces of advice for anyone sitting here watching this thinking, what the hell is going on with this market? I really want to sell my property. What should I do? So as a property advocate, what would you say to them? What questions would you ask them?
Absolutely. Well, as a vendor advocate, my first thing would be, is it urgent, you know, that you sell? If it's not urgent, well, then maybe you have the luxury of time to wait and see what's going on. But if it is urgent, then you really need to be clear about, okay, what's driving the urgency? If you sell, then what needs to be taken into consideration? Are you selling an investment property or is it a home? And if you are selling a home, then what opportunity do you have to ensure that you've got somewhere safe to land? If settlement for some reason isn't extended, but you're not able to buy, you know, for some reason you've got challenges buying in that time. I mean, obviously if you can sell, you should be able to buy. But as you noted, the reality is that people are selling anyway. It just means people can't buy at the moment. So that's something to take into consideration. And, you know, certainly again, as a vendor advocate, make sure you interview multiple selling agents and ask very specific questions in terms of their skill set and their capabilities to help you get an outcome.
Therein lies another interview, because that's a very difficult thing to do, especially when real estate agents are so skilled at selling themselves. So that's subject for another interview, Miriam. I can feel it coming on. Thank you for your time.
Happy to do so. You're very welcome. Thanks, Kevin.
Real Estate Talk, part of the Realty Media Group. We also produce The Property Show, Real Estate Uncut, and CoreLogic's auction update shows. All available for catch-up anytime at realty.com.au. Thanks to BMT Tax Depreciation, Printforce and Propertyology for their support. Watch out for us in your inbox next weekend, or catch us anytime at realty.com.au.